Well, Bryan, I appreciate you being a part of Kevin Unscripted and opening your home up. This is actually where we're doing the recording of this episode right now, and I just appreciate your time and how willing and informative you've been. I can't believe some of the stories that you've told till now, and can't wait to get into it a little bit better.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Kevin, for having me. And I love to tell a story. You know, we have a crew to tell a story about. It's not all about me, that's for certain. So fly right at it.
Absolutely. Well, let's put the foundation down. I'll read a little bit of an intro, and then you can kind of elaborate as to the accuracy of it. But Bryan Reid Sr. is a seasoned log home builder with over 4 decades of experience in the industry. And I think we were talking, that's pretty much about 50 years now, isn't it?
50 years this year, Kevin.
This year?
Years this year.
So we're actually getting you on the 50th anniversary.
What's that, the diamond anniversary? What is it? I don't know.
No, you're right. There's every 50. It's definitely a special one. I don't know which one it is, but yeah, you're right. Well, the timing couldn't have been better, that's for sure. Especially as founder of Pioneer Log Homes, based in Williams Lake, BC, Canada. You are known for exceptional craftsmanship and a commitment to creating the world's finest log homes. Each log home is pre-built in Williams Lake, then disassembled and shipped around the world to its final destination. Bryan's passion is evident in his work, whether it's a cozy cabin or a sprawling mansion. Recently, Bryan Sr. embarked on an ambitious project to transform a 1,000-year-old cedar tree into a log cabin, showcasing his consistent pursuit of innovation and excellence. Bryan Sr. is also a prominent figure alongside his son and crew on the popular TV show Timber Kings that aired from 2014 to 2017. The show offered a unique behind-the-scene look at Pioneer Log Homes, showcasing the creativity, skills, and hard work that goes into creating each log home masterpiece. The primary cast members included Troy McNeil, who was the narrator, Peter Arnold, Beat Schwaller. I'm not sure. Did I pronounce that right?
That's good enough.
Okay. Andre Chevenet. Bryan Reid Jr., which obviously is your son. Joel Rorda. And Bryan Reid Sr. yourself. And there's a lot more here that we can definitely get into, but that I think outlines kind of, the gist of you and Pioneer Log Homes, isn't it?
50 years in one paragraph.
Yeah, and how do you, well, we were looking at some of these notes here, and I had to revise what I originally started with, which is literally 2 pages. I'm like, man, I'm not gonna be able to cover all that. So the trick is to try and actually hit on some of the parts and encapsulate it into something a little bit more reasonable, isn't it?
Yeah, and life 50 years didn't go by without its hardships and its, there's in any business, even if you're working for somebody, there's ups and downs and things that happen, but if you take them properly, they usually enrich you.
Yeah.
And make you smarter for the next time. So what I learned long ago was you can't do everything yourself. You have to trust in other people. And if you can find people that bring their brain to work as well as their feet and their hands, you've got it made.
Yeah.
You've got it made.
That's a lot easier said than done, though, isn't it?
Well, I guess I was fortunate, that we put together a team that I could trust absolutely. There was never a time that I was embarrassed by anything they did. Most often I was amazed by what they did, as well as our customer was amazed by what they did. And I can't say enough about the clients either. The customer, whatever name you tag on them, if they hadn't asked us to go and do the impossible, we would have never strived to do the impossible.
No, pushing the boundaries.
They did. They wanted, and I mean, last night we had customers here from Michigan, and it's another boundary they want us to push. It's totally, it's the most gratifying occupation that you could have picked in your whole life and gone from Williams Lake, BC to the world.
Well, there's a couple, I think, things that stuck out when you're outlining that. Is one, the help in the workforce. Not only is an obstacle at the best of times, especially seemingly, nowadays, but it's a very niche, specific trade, and it's not even a trade. It's more of an art form that not a lot of people really have, and you're able to bring that team together, all into one little area in Williams Lake. Was there an element now when it came to that you're able to pull from? Like Williams Lake, out of all places to be globally known, is not a likely place that you would think of.
No, it was probably known for a stampede.
Yeah.
Much more than it was known for log building. But so there was a few breaks in life, that people that asked you to build and you took on a project, and if life is a bunch of steps on a ladder or a staircase, some of those you can identify as one of the steps that took you to the next level. And one would be for sure a house we built. Most people, I go back a little bit. Years ago, I built a log house. So the first one I built was my own, 1973. My dad had been a trapper in this area, and we trapped beaver. We had a log cabin that we stayed in quite often. And it seems when I was young, it was 50 below, a lot more than it is today.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, you'd be out and clothes were different, boots were different, traps were different. Everything was different than today. Not quite as much technology, but a lot of experience had gone into designing them. So we had felt boots. We didn't have multi-layered clothes. We had a wool sweater and a Mackinac jacket, and that's 50 below
zero.
No
such thing as Helly Hansen or Baffin boots, winter boots, eh?
Not that we could afford anyway, I'll tell you that. And, that little log cabin between Lacklahash and Williams Lake that we'd walk to, so it was about 15 miles. We'd walk. We were trapping nuisance beaver for the game department. When you got there, it was the difference between life and death. If you had to stay out or something had happened and you didn't have access to a heater and a shelter, you'd have perished. So we'd get to that little log cabin, and we always left wood there to start the fire and matches and that, so we knew that it would be easy to push the elements back from your life. Yeah. And 20 minutes, half an hour later, you're sitting there in your T-shirt. It's 50 below outside, the wind's blowing, and you're talking about what a wonderful day you had.
Yeah, wow. Well, the element that you touched on when it came to maybe some of the requests with the customers and then this area and pushing the boundaries, those are, I think, through adversity, you build a lot of skill and resiliency. And going to, the wilderness, if you didn't have enough foresight to be able to absorb some of the unknowns, through the travels of whether it be life, business, or whatever have you, how do you absorb that? So it sounds like that's something that was instilled in you right from the very beginning. You had, I think, a upbringing and in an environment that was always pushing the threshold a little bit, that allowed you to be able to learn and thrive and excel and take that challenge on.
Yeah, I mean, there was no magic to it. It was really survival. And the fact that I loved that little log cabin. And when I got married, which was quite young, I wanted to build my family a home that made them feel as good as I had felt in my log cabin with my dad, with my stepdad, actually, when I was quite young. So when I got out of high school, that's what I did. I built something in an industry that didn't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's unreal.
When
it came from just an idea and the fact you wanted to be able to replicate and make something that had a huge impact on you at your youth.
Well, yeah,
like almost like when your stepdad or your dad, was it almost like a tribute? Is that kind of where?
Yeah, I would say that was certainly part of it.
Part of it.
I just the pioneering days in this country. They weren't that far in the rearview mirror. That it really didn't open up till, the California gold rush was in 1849. The gold rush here was in 1859, 10 years later. Well, that's when really this country opened up. So everybody in those days. All the road houses, 150-mile house, 100-mile house, they were all log. Everything along the road was log. And when you get to the 50s, the sawmills came to town. Everything was not log anymore. The log buildings were the thing of the past. The local material you had to build to keep your family sheltered and that were put aside, and you build a 2x4 house or a 2x6 house and put sawdust for insulation most times and tar paper on the outside. And that was how it transformed. So in the 60s and early 70s, there'd been a big mine move to Williams Lake, Gibraltar, and they were building houses. They were digging 3 or 4 basements a week.
Oh, wow.
Up on the old airport in Williams Lake.
Yeah.
And I looked at this and thought, that's not the kind of housing that I would probably want my family to grow up, or I didn't want anything to do with it. You know, my history had been kind of log houses and working with your hands.
Yeah, and there's something about a log home that not only has, I think, the warm feeling to it, but there's a bit more of an actual craftsmanship, a hands-on application that captures, I think, the essence of a family also and what it took to build it. Because, like you said, I think that was actually, log homes was, I think, built out of necessity. If you didn't build a homestead typically out of those materials, you just weren't going to survive. And then that shift into stick building and, you know, how we build houses now, it lost, I think, that essence, the capture of what a log home has. Like typically, if you look at a nice painting, it's a log home with a wood fireplace, usually by a creek.
Yeah, and a shake roof. That was it. That was a
exactly.
Log home. And truly, all the homes we built at first, so my first house had a shake roof. And then everything we built probably for 10 years, my line to people was, if you don't have a shake roof, you don't have a log house. If you don't have a stone fireplace, you don't have a log house. So that was the elements we put into the
earlier days. And then it shifted over into tin or even shingle, or was it more, you prefer the tin?
Well, our local market, we used shakes. But then when you get out of, like when you grew and started to move out of Williams Lake, a lot of areas, they tell you what you can put on a roof. The CC&Rs say...
Because of building codes and whatnot?
Building codes and aesthetic codes for a subdivision.
Yeah.
You know, usually, I mean, you had to fight to get a log house in. It's just a wood house, but you had to go against all the CC&Rs. We're building a wood house. Because it's log, it doesn't matter. It's like a siding, you know, if you take it for its aesthetics from the outside. But they'd say, well, you need a tile roof. This subdivision is all tile, or it's all slate, or it's all asphalt, whatever, you know. So they dictated what went on. And I have to say that, you know, after a couple fires on log homes, one of them was in Whistler, and it was, I could mention names, it was for the people that own the Kenworth distribution in British Columbia and Alberta. And that. They were wonderful people. Probably one of the steps on the ladder you had to climb.
Oh.
But they shared things with you that, you know, you'd think that no businessman would. They were secrets, you know, in doing business. Anyway, so we built them a beautiful house in Whistler, and it was May, kind of like right now. It was warm during the day, but it got cool at night. Well, they had some trash in their fireplace, paper and stuff, and they lit it off, and after a while they wondered why it was so bright outside. Well, it was their shake roof was on fire.
Oh no.
Yeah.
My goodness. You know, but that's what makes it a lot more, I think, personal too. You're talking about some of the rungs, you know, especially with that last client. And I found that I've worked for a lot of people too that have been wildly difficult to work with. But one of the elements that come out of that is not only do they push you to achieve, I think, a higher standard for yourself, but they are, I think, on the spectrum of excessively loyal if they see that you're applying yourself, you know, and you're wanting to do a good job. But because that's the standard they hold themselves to, and especially if you're building a log home that they, represents them and they want to feel good about, I'm sure there's a lot of standards that are difficult to achieve. But in that, like you're saying, it brings a higher standard and skills for yourself that probably has enough longevity to where that's where the new standard is, right? Because now you push the boundaries and okay, this is now the new standard we're going to hold ourselves accountable to. Where the customer, the difficult ones probably have a lot to contribute in the whole process of, the company in itself.
Yeah, you're 100% right. But I never had a difficult client, ever. I had clients that wanted more. I was in the construction business 50 years. I've never been to court. Most of the custom contractors that I got to know in all over the lower 50 states, Alaska, most of Canada, anybody that did custom goes to court on almost every house because they have differences of opinion with the lady or the man, the clients, or the contract. There's a lot of moving parts. So we're the log supplier. Somebody else did the foundation. Somebody else puts the roofing on. Somebody else plumbs it. Somebody else wires it.
All the different contractors.
Windows, doors, all the different contractors. We do a major part, but we don't do the whole job. So you can't control everything, but you can try and educate those people, those trades, while you're there, or even if you have to go back, and spend the time. Tell them that it's not round to square. You prepare everything so it's very simple, very straightforward, different than what they're used to, but still very straightforward. Use this instead of that for doing the job.
Yeah.
That gets you to the job. This gets you through the job.
Wow. Was that, I think, something that you had an awareness and approach from the beginning, going back to, the earlier days? Was that how you approached and built the foundation to the company, to start with?
Yeah, that's, you could never build a company with 120 employees if you did everything yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
So you have to realize that other people in a lot of instances are better than you.
Yeah.
Just because you started the company or had this dream doesn't mean that you're the best at everything in that industry. There are better people in computers than work for some of the big computer companies. There's better people in stonemasons or highway pavers than work at some of the biggest ones. But if you can arrange a group of people, call them employees or staff or friends or family, and you keep those people happy, rewarded. Praise from a client is worth more than money. To me, I would trade it any day because it elevates you to the next.
Yeah.
What better reward than somebody that has offered you the opportunity to build their house or their main residence or whatever, their recreational home, and they say, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
That's the mission accomplished feeling. All of the nuance and struggles that went up to that point. Isn't it crazy that one little pivotal moment is what makes that whole journey up to that point worth it? The recognition and acknowledgement and sense of satisfaction that must go into something like that.
Yeah, from another human being,
exactly.
I'm not saying I didn't wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning a lot of nights sweating, in a cold sweat. What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
How am I going to pay the bills? I got payroll coming up. I owe for lumber. I owe for this and how am I going to make it all work? But we made it all work.
Yeah.
And as we went through and we were passionate about what we did, we had integrity. We had integrity that the client could see. And it wasn't just me. It was everybody that worked for me. They were just, I
can see it definitely meant a lot, didn't it? I think that was the juice in it all that kept you going, especially as the company grew. You probably had, I think, a sense of responsibility also and gratitude into the people that really also invested themselves into the company and allowed it to grow to where it is now.
Yeah, they did. They put in almost as many years as I did. So, and the company is still, I mean, as I did. My son has taken over the company now, and I could have waited till I was 90 and he was 70, but he probably would have said, so long, So I thought it was a time that I probably should step back. And if you look back in history, if you look back at, I'm not saying Pioneer. Pioneer is the largest handcrafted log builder in the world, that truly handcrafts. We don't chink everything and just slap logs together. I mean, we're a true handcrafter. We use Western red cedar, which I believe is the finest material, finest fiber you could use in the world for a log home.
Where does this Western cedar come from? Is it grown? Is it native to this area?
No. We have some Western red cedar grows in the Caribous and in the front slopes of the Rockies, but usually it's not that healthy, so it's got defects in it. So as our company grew and our client base demanded more, we went out to the coast, and so we wouldn't take wood from anywhere south of the northern tip of Vancouver Island. We wanted slow-growing wood, not old growth. I mean, it's just slow-growing, and, it doesn't grow. If you measure the growth rings in a table like this one, I mean, the growth rings are 64th of an inch apart, or a centimeter, or whatever that is.
Yeah, very well, slow grow. We'll touch on that too, because I got some pictures that we're going to throw in here. Because this table is amazing because of the different stamps you have on here with very distinct points in history. How old is this table? Do you know?
It's over 1,000 years old. And the tree, we salvaged it out of the water, grow in Bella Coola Inlet.
Really?
So it had come down on a slide, which is quite common out there. They get a lot of snow and then the big melt in the spring and a big rainfall. And there's a lot there at times. There's a lot of wood floating out in that area. So two of the nicest center logs we've ever got were both salvaged from the.
So this was actually floating, wasn't waterlogged and sank to the.
Cedar won't sink. I've seen dogs.
Oh, really?
60 years old that are still floating.
Wow.
Yeah. No, it's a very desirable wood. So, it's for building, it's very straight grained. For shrinkage, it shrinks radially about half of what spruce, pine, and fir, SPF. So they all have to be kiln dried as a rule. So there's not too much shrinkage.
Yeah.
And even in home construction, it would crack the sheetrock in the house. But cedar is so stable.
Unreal. Yeah. And of course, because of the oils in it, it repels a lot of insects. So you wouldn't have a lot of the bugs infesting the wood itself that a lot of other woods would typically have issues with.
Any of the other woods. We build from the Southern California border all the way to Alaska, anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. And a lot of those areas, like California, there's termites came from Australia, from Africa on the sailing ships. They got into the wooden boats. Yeah. And then they came over. Yeah. And they prospered. The crazy things prospered. So there's a lot of hungry insects out there that.
Yeah. And cedar you can ship pretty much all over the world, and there aren't other native insects in other parts of the world that like to munch on cedar?
So far it's been impervious for us to everything.
Miracle wood, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Pretty much.
You would call it that, but at the same time then, because it's such a desirable fiber, it gets harder to get and a lot more expensive. Like I always tell people, if you go to Home Depot and buy an 8-foot cedar 2x4 or buy an 8-foot SPF 2x4, the price will be 3 times as much for cedar. So that's one way to judge what the fiber that goes into your house is. Mm.
Yeah, the quality. So you mentioned, though, that this cedar and a lot of the materials that you're using for logs, they come from southern BC, typically along the coast on the island?
Well, we call it the Central Coast, so the north end of Vancouver Island all the way to the north end of Haida Gwaii.
Oh.
So not from the south coast.
So we're talking like Campbell River north on the...
even north of that, Port Hardy.
Port Hardy. Oh, okay.
Port Hardy,
Oh
Bella
my
Bella,
goodness. So that's like the
Ballacoola.
very top little tip. That's a tiny little area.
Yep.
Wow. So you take all of those logs and materials, you bring it all the way up to Williams Lake?
Actually, it goes down to the Fraser River, comes up the Fraser, gets dewatered in either Maple Ridge or Mission. We haul them up the highway, do our work here, and then most of them get hauled back down Highway
My
97.
goodness. It just doesn't seem like this is very, like, why wouldn't you kind of relocate? I'm just trying to, especially with the beginning days of starting Pioneer Log Home in Williams Lake, and then some of the materials being so far away. Was there any point in time you're like, okay, maybe we should relocate to where the source of our material is?
Well, so I was raised here. We moved up here in, I think, 1961. So you have to think of your labor force. So, and then the climate. So Williams Lake, as much as we don't like the cold weather, is great for drying wood. So we bring the wood in, we take the bark off, we pile it so the air can blow through it. And cedar, the old timers, there was no dry kilns in the sawmills. They had to put the boards out with stickers between them and wait till Mother Nature dried them down so they could sell them to the international market. So we take our logs, we rough peel them, put them in decks, and then when it's time, we can use those logs for log construction.
Oh, so the whole environment that we're in Williams Lake was such an advantage when it came to being able to prepare the materials that it made it well worth being able to bring in all the materials from elsewhere. And the labor force that you mentioned too. I'm curious about that a little bit because the lower down south, especially, in the Vancouver area, there's a way higher density. I don't know if a lot of people realize Canada, our population density follows our southern border, and even far more. 75% of the Canadian population end up over in eastern Canada, like Toronto, Montreal, Quebec area. And then in BC is more the lower mainland area. So when it came to labor force, being up in Williams Lake, you said that there was opportunity when it came to that. But it's a smaller population density. So what allowed where was that advantage being up here when it came to finding craftsmanship?
Well, so part of the advantage is Indigenous people. So the fellow that actually taught me, I didn't go out with an axe and build my first log house. I had a native Indian, his name was Samson Jack, and he had built some log houses in the Depression, so the 30s, 35, 40 years earlier, with some Norwegian settlers, cheap houses, log houses. So Samson Jack retained a lot of that, and he built houses.
Wow.
So here I worked with Samson Jack. To me, he was, if he'd have been literate, I mean, he was not schooled. He was schooled in hard knocks.
Yeah.
He would have been an engineer.
Wow.
He was so smart. And he was the type of man that was willing to share his knowledge. If you wanted to learn, if you could absorb it, he would
just
teach
a
you.
gold mine of wealth and knowledge, eh? Too bad we couldn't have captured a podcast with him. Capture that little essence of who he was. I mean, that would have been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, he was a true gentleman.
Yeah.
He loved log building. There wasn't enough to do, to stay busy, till some crazy guy like me and a friend of mine came along, Hans Blosel, and we both
shared a vision, right? I mean, with the log homes, obviously had, I think, an interest and a passion that was very similar and in line with what he had too.
Yeah.
So he had a huge part in the craftsmanship and the ability to be able to build log homes. And did you at that time just kind of go off of the idea and the craftsmanship of building a log home, or did you start at the beginning with some form of blueprint? Like, what was your approach on it? We want 4 walls and maybe 1 room, and that's about it, or?
Well, it's so the back of a napkin, I guess, is probably.
That's where the best ideas come from.
I'm going to tell you that even today, Even today, people will come, and if you take them for dinner or something, they'll grab a napkin and they'll start scratching.
Oh,
on it.
really?
It goes. It's carried all the way through. But in those days, I mean, an architect, who could afford an architect? Who knew an architect?
Yeah.
We're in Williams Lake, for God's sake, you know.
Yeah.
So you would draw it out. You had to build a foundation under it. You know, you had to build a concrete foundation. You had to have enough to show that. So you'd get a draftsman or something to do a little drafting. And then I was lucky enough to do a house in the 80s in Northern California for a fella, and his architect was a Vietnam veteran. And he had become an architect. He wrote his architectural ticket without ever going to architect school.
Really?
The governor of
He
California.
challenged the test and he passed it just from life experiences.
And his will.
Wow. But he had the ability to be able to show his work. Like, I know schooling back then, having the answer is one thing, but when you're writing a lot of these tests, they require you to show your work. And he had that in-depth
And the
standard of understanding.
The governor of California intervened, and
Wow.
yeah. And the funny part is, he was from Salinas. He was a full-blooded Native Indian too.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that had a huge impact on the workforce.
well, you can't stereotype anything, but people like to work outside.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people don't like to work outside, even in Williams Lake. They want, a controlled environment. And,
Yep.
But a lot of the folks, well, we have to do everything outside. So Samson Jack was, other than my stepfather, was probably the biggest influence in me building my first log house. And then we stumbled along, and I'll say stumble because in those days, so I'd started in 73. About the end of the 70s, there was log builders popping up in 100 Mile and, just different people that saw that, there was a
Bit of an
raw
opportunity.
material and a opportunity. So we'd get a client, say, come to Williams Lake, and they'd say, okay, Bryan, how much for this? And they'd have a little plan, a rough plan. I'd say, okay, so I'll pick a number, $10,000. And then they'd go to 100 Mile, and they'd say to Jim, okay, Jim, how much to build this house? Bryan will do it for 10.
Of course, yeah.
And then they'd come back, then they'd go to whatever their process was. They'd come back to me and say, Bryan, we can get this.
Yeah, exactly.
for-
That's the classic way of being able to get a better deal, for sure.
Yeah. And, we were doing it because we loved the business. We weren't doing it because if you couldn't make any money at it. And it looked to me like looking in a toilet bowl when you flushed it. This was all going down the drain.
Yeah, especially with the newer techniques of building homes, like you had mentioned earlier. Uh-huh.
There was no industry. So you had to build a new industry, and you can't build a new industry if there's nothing in it.
Yeah.
If there's no future in it. So, and my idea of building a business was never like you see today. Somebody does a company and they sell it to Microsoft or Google or something. They spend 3 or 4 years at it. They might work
Build
hard.
it up,
They
sell
build
it
it
off.
up and they flog it. My idea was to keep it, and the family would have work, and the kids would have work, and the grandkids would have work, and all. Maybe it was a bad business plan. Maybe
That was the envision. That I think obviously attracted another part of the element of why people were attracted to work for you, and then also be a part of what you're talking about, where they really, it sounds to me like a lot of people invested themselves into, what you were trying to build.
Well, that's true, and outside work, hard work. Like it's like going to the gym, but 8 hours a day, and giving the maximum. And then so we chugged along, and we had an opportunity to build a few homes in Arizona. In 1992, the Alaska Highway was 50 years old. That's hard to believe. It's probably 100 years old now, but anyway. It's not, but it's at least 80. So there was a lot of tourists used Highway 97.
Yeah.
And that was the year we moved along Highway 97 in Williams Lake. So we had an opportunity. A few people were driving by, and one of them, a great friend of mine, Larry George. and he wanted a house in Arizona. Well, I thought, I'd never been to Arizona. Heck, I'm, from Williams Lake. Hardly been to Vancouver,
Yeah.
So we built the house, went to Arizona, and it was in the high country. So over about 7,000 feet in elevation.
Cool.
Well, it's very much like Williams Lake. There's pine trees that are 2 feet through. It's not the desert. It's not the valley. So Larry and I got along famously, and we ended up opening an office in Arizona. I might be jumping ahead, but it was a very important part of our building career, our building strategy, or whatever you want to call it. So we built Larry's house, and we built another one next door for a friend of his, Bernie. And people started coming, just like they did in Williams Lake when I built my first house. The local golf course came and wanted to know how much for a clubhouse and this stuff going on. I'm thinking to myself, or am I the only log builder around? Because in Williams Lake, they'd be going to 100 Mile and Quesnel. And
there's way more options, supply and demand.
Yeah, well, we got almost every job that we talked about. So here we opened an office in Arizona. I truly believe we did 80 or 90 houses there before anybody knew what we were doing.
Oh, really?
But everything was built in Williams Lake.
Unreal.
It would go on a truck and disappear. We weren't competing in Washington or Oregon, any of the border states or British, we did local work, but, maybe Fort St. John we did a couple, we did houses.
So that was where you started to branch out from a local supply and demand to obviously Arizona, and things started to expand. And that was, I think, that from what I understand here, the beginnings of the global expansion. And
it was the beginning of clients demanding more. Requesting more. They never demanded. Ever.
No, for sure.
They requested that we do special logs for them in the house. And if they could fly to Williams Lake, they could pick a log that would be in their house. I mean, they can't come and peel all the logs. They can't do, but they could have a part in having special features in their house that they were part of, Yeah. Nobody else offered that. So we'd have at least 1 or 2 families a week or couples coming to Williams Lake, flying to Williams Lake, staying in local hotels, eating in restaurants, and coming to our sites. And
adding to the local economy, the town.
I think it was a big part of Williams Lake's economy. People didn't know it, though. They saw the houses going up at the Williams Lake site.
Yeah, and they were gone. They were disappearing.
They were gone. Until we got the TV show, which we can talk about later. But until we got the TV show, most people had no idea.
Well, I agree, because I even lived in Williams Lake, and I remember driving by. I don't know how many times we drove by your site just outside of town city limits there, and I seen the crane and everything else. But I knew it was log home, but I didn't really actually have a real good understanding. I've already told the story about when I think it was 15, working out at the Pollock's farm by likely in horsefly, and in the evenings we'd go and we'd peel logs. And I knew it was coming to Pioneer Log Homes, but I didn't make the connection. I didn't have any idea. I wish I did, actually, because I probably would have come over and actually looked for a job. I mean, the whole I think part of my future probably would have taken a complete different direction, but it was under the radar. And living in town, growing up, we knew of the building site, but I don't think anybody really had a real good idea of exactly what was going on there.
So I'll back up a bit. So when I first started, every house we put was on 10 acres, in the middle of the 10 acres, in a treed lot. So you'd tell somebody, I'm building a house in Springhouse. They'd say, we didn't see it. Well, you couldn't see it from the road. Everybody hid their log houses away. In
why is that?
Acreages. It's the type of people that wanted the log house. They wanted privacy. They wanted So a fellow and his wife, Jim Redicop, came along in 1979 and said, we want a log house. We have a piece of land on the way to Horsefly. It's at Miocene. And it looks over the highway and the Pioneer Ranch. So I went out to take a look at it. Would be almost the first house that would be in a high-profile location. And Jim and I ended up friends. He just passed away, God bless him, but 40 years we were friends, 43.
Wow.
We ended up business partners. We bought land together. We did different projects together. And
Wow.
yeah. So we built the house. All of a sudden, anybody going to Horsefly, which if you're not from this area, probably you think you're going to get bit by a bunch of insects, but it's one of the most beautiful recreation areas
It is.
in the Caribou.
The landscape is amazing.
It is, and you see the Caribou Mountains, you see the crystal clear waters. Anyway, so that gave us some exposure. That was one of the steps in the ladder that you see exposure equals sales.
Yep.
They go hand in hand. So one of the next things we did for exposure, so we did Jim's house before we did Arizona. So then we went from Jim's house, exposure, moved our site along the highway in Williams Lake before 1992, when the Alaska Highway had its centennial, or bicentennial, and then opened an office in Arizona. And then I got to go to Las Vegas to do a home show.
Oh, there you go. Oh, boy. Putting you on the map there.
Well, I'm standing on the strip in Vegas. We're doing a log home show. And all these vehicles are driving by, and they're plastered with advertising.
Yeah.
And do you think Caesar's Palace is advertising for Bellagio? Or do you think any of the casinos are advertising for the one next door?
Exactly.
All they're doing is targeting what they have.
Yep.
Come to our door. Come to our door. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars, vehicles driving up and down the strip probably
That's
for
true.
18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Come to our door. Come to our door. And I look and I think, these people, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They're advertising their product to whoever will look.
Yeah. Putting awareness out there.
Yeah. And I thought, you know what? Pioneer has to do a better job of, putting awareness out there. Be it making them people aware that we have this available to them. We don't want to beat them up. We can't build for everybody in the world. But why not let more people know that what our product is and that it's available?
Yeah.
Just like
So
Vegas.
what did you do then? Like, what was your next step out of that?
Well, I jump all over. But so one thing was, thing was to open an office in California.
Oh.
Because my friend Larry, who I talked about that we built for in Arizona, told me something that I've never forgotten. He said, "Why did Jesse James rob banks?" I said, "Larry, I don't know." And he said, "That's where the money is." So
Fair enough.
I built a house or an office in Santa Barbara, California. You know why?
That's where the money is.
And that's where the money was and is. So if it's not just the amount of population, the house was along Highway 101. I mean, 25,000 cars a day.
Yeah.
More than goes up the Alaska Highway in a month, goes by in a day. So, again, it was marketing.
That's
Exposure.
true. Just to put a moment of pause, I know that number. I just actually did it because I'm on the Alaska Highway. And 2.7 million, because I'm putting billboards up. I live there and I was like, I got to utilize some of what you're talking about, exposure. 2.7 million people travel up and down the Alaska Highway a year, which results to about 7,400, 7,500 a day. So
That's people.
That's
There's
people.
usually two in a car. There's 25,000 cars a day go by on 101. So
Yeah.
God bless the Highway 97.
Never actually thought about that.
It starts in Weed, California.
Yeah.
It goes all the way to Anchorage, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Highway 97.
97.
Yeah.
And the Alaska Highway, mile 0 is in Dawson Creek.
Yeah, where you're from.
But
yeah.
that is 97. And it goes, where does it originate?
Weed, California.
My
Northern
goodness,
California.
I had no idea that the highway started way down across the border.
Yeah, it starts in the United
Oh my
States.
goodness. And is it called 97 down there also?
It is.
Wow.
It goes to Klamath, Oregon, from Weed, California, and then up through across the Columbia River and into Washington. So goes through Ellensburg, Washington, Wenatchee, Okanagan, and crosses at Orville.
Wow.
Into Canada at Osoyoos. And
Okay, yeah.
that's Highway 97.
That's where so that's where it crosses the border.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Well,
Till just now. We're connected. That's pretty cool. I like that little piece of information.
So most of the traffic that goes up on the west side of the Rockies, so that's California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, will drive 97 to get to Alaska. The ones on the east side that want to go to Alaska, they'll go through Alberta and up through Grand Prairie and come out, and then they'll take the Alaska. So we had, with our operation on the highway here, access to all those people, whether they're from Vancouver or whether they're from San Diego, that want to go to Alaska or northern British Columbia, the Yukon. Yeah.
Wow, that's a focal point now when it comes to awareness.
And
so that was obviously strategically opening a base down there.
well,
It just made sense, not only the money, but then also the exposure.
It was all about its numbers. How many eyeballs get to see it?
Yeah.
And we don't expect to build for everybody that sees us because we couldn't. Even if everybody wanted one, we couldn't do it. So, but we just want one or two out of each group. And we did the house in California. At the same time, we decided that we should do some home shows, some shows, and actually take our product where the people went locally. So we did some big shows. We didn't necessarily do all the log home shows because every log builder in the country was there.
Yeah.
We did Barrett Jackson car auction, 20 years.
Oh, wow.
We did Barrett, 250,000 people.
Yeah, that car auction, Barrett Jackson, I mean, we're talking, is it actually, I think that's probably out of all the auctions, the biggest one.
I think it's
the most prestigious, yeah.
Yeah, by far. And I mean, you have people from Saudi Arabia, you have people from China, you have people from all over the world. If they're not there, they're bidding by computer.
Yeah.
But so we put up a whole house our first year. We put up a cabin at Barrett Jackson, and people just...
Man, that's smart. That's a good idea.
It's an affluent audience.
Yeah.
It's an affluent audience from all over the world. Same as Vegas. So I got to back up. I have another story. So
you know what? I love that. We can meander wherever you like.
I was watching TV one day, watching the news, and Bryan Sr.
Yeah.
So she's in Iran. Those people hate us. The people that were around her. Down with the USA. Down with imperialism. Down with capitalism. All this. There's this little old lady, and Bryan Sr. singles her out and has her come and say, she starts asking her questions and making a friend, and the woman is, hates the U.S. And then Diane said, if you could go to the U.S., where would you want to go? The little old lady, she's got to be 80 years old, says, Las Vegas.
Out of all the places. So
you have to say to yourself, you better learn from Las Vegas, because if they can get somebody in Iran to want to go there and not blow it up.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So we would do home shows in Vegas, and we would do Barrett Jackson in Vegas. They had I don't know if they still do it, but in 2008, 9, when things were getting slow, we did their shows. We did Scottsdale for about 20 years. People would know us. They'd come and say, oh, you don't have a log cabin this year? We hadn't had one for 15 years, but they remember.
Just seen that one.
Yeah.
That one, really, did that just happen in 1 year?
Yeah.
Holy man, that resonated for a long time.
And the same, we donated a few times to, I don't know if you ever heard of Safari Club. It's a group of hunters that come from, pretty well all over the world.
Yeah.
There's guides, there's people that hunt, there's people that support guides, there's manufacturers. We donated a cabin a couple of years in a row, and one of them went to Sturgis. You probably heard of Sturgis.
Yeah, of course, the bikes.
The bike deal. And anyway, after that, we would just take a booth, a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 20 booth, and put up a little desk and that. People would come and say, oh, you don't have a cabin this year? It's been 20 bloody years since we had a cabin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
that was just the 1 year. You didn't... you didn't keep going back, because of that exposure that you got out of the 1 year. Like,
Well, we went back, but we didn't always take a cabinet.
oh,
We would have a booth, just a booth, some pictures of log houses and brochures. That, again, we couldn't sell a house to everybody that walked through the door. We just wanted to get to talk to the one or two that loved log homes, that loved what we did. And we could, you can get a vibe from people as you're talking to them, if you want to build their house or not, and not that we became that picky, but we could build for the clients that we wanted. And we wanted to build for outdoors people, that appreciated nature around them. And that's kind of how the company ended up.
yeah, it's a brand that I think develops with awareness, but the clients that you're going for, and let me know if I'm right on this, but the clients that you're gravitating to wasn't really the ones that wanted the brand itself. It was the ones for the appreciation, for the exposure of some of the markings on the wood from carving, from being able to strip the logs off, and the finer details and craftsmanship that not only went into it, but what it actually takes to be able to build it. And that sense of appreciation from the customer was what you got on the back end once you were able to build it, is a completed, I think, project. And their response and I think sense of value of what they were receiving was the payoff that you got. Whereas you're not going to get that just from somebody who wants it because it's a brand or it's.
So you're right. The customers built the brand. Yeah. What they wanted and what they told their friends and what was communicated out in public was by the customers.
Yeah.
What they saw, what they received. Another break in building pioneer log homes over the years was I'd built a house on Williams Lake sometime in the I guess it was probably the late 80s, early 80s. And I sold it to a Swiss gentleman. And the Swiss fellow I sold it to, he's not with us anymore. I mean, he passed on, but because it's a long time ago. He was a contractor in Switzerland. So he said to me, I'd like my nephew to come and work with you for a while. And I thought, oh, sure. We're going to get some guy from some country that thinks he knows.
Exactly.
Who's going to tell us Canadians how to build a log house? Look at the house. Coming. So this fella comes, and he came with one of his friends. We brought him in legally. We got him a work visa, because I always believe that if you do something wrong, it'll follow you forever. So do it right. Get the visas. Even when I worked in the U.S., I had a visa in the 80s, for God's sake, So anyway, we brought these two Swiss guys over. One's name was Hans-Uli Herger, and it was the nephew of Hans Herger, who I'd sold my house to. Anyway, I looked at these guys. They come and they got this big broad-rimmed hat, and they got a ruffled shirt and corduroy bottom pants. But that's part of their guild. They were in a guild. Yeah. Their guild tells them that they have to leave home for 3 years. They can't come home. And it's within 60 kilometers because it's a very old guild, and the days you had to walk. Anyway, these people go all over the world. Uli had worked in Egypt, in Miami, in Israel, and their job in doing this, their whole motive was to learn new things and bring it back to the trade in Switzerland. Oh. So they could. Now, what about that? How'd you like to leave your family and friends and everything for 3.5 years and say, I'm on the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be working. I'm going to work hard. And I thought Canadians, I thought as log builders we knew everything, but I know now we didn't.
And so you were able to learn from him as much as what he was trying to learn from you and take back.
Not just from him, but so when he came, another Swiss fella came with him. So Uli was with us for like 3 years, but his girlfriend didn't want to stay in Canada. It's a big move to come from a third of the way around the world, and your school chums are there, and your mom and dad, and I mean it's huge. So I understood. I hated to see him go because he would, if he had to move a log, he'd put it on his shoulder and move it. He would just come from that part of Switzerland. You don't wait for anything. You do it yourself, which is the way we worked, If you could lift it. I mean, But short log, he was a machine.
Wow.
He was a machine, and a machine that brought his brain to work. He would just, like...
He applied himself.
And he would have been a physics major, if he had gone into physics, but he didn't want to. He wanted to work with wood. So anyway, that was the beginning of bringing some workers. And we started with Switzerland because Switzerland at the time had a program with Canada that young tradesmen could come for 1 year. So they'd come for a year, and then if they wanted to immigrate, you could extend their visa and they could do their immigration process.
Oh, okay.
And of course, you'd bring 10 people over and one might immigrate. But you know what? One was better than none.
Yeah.
So we started this program, and now we have, 6 or 8 from Switzerland, 1 from Germany. We have Danish workers coming in.
Wow.
And they all bring something.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about a diversity that you're not going to get. It's pretty hard. It's impossible to replicate.
You can't go to a university in BC or Canada and learn how to build a windmill in Denmark or the Netherlands. Yeah. But you know what? You can have somebody come from the Netherlands or Denmark that builds windmills and come here and teach you.
Yeah, and the team now is going to be enriched from it all, and all those different ways of looking at things would probably I can't even imagine how that would build out, I think, the foundation of not only a company. It's hard to think of it as a company, but I guess a team.
Well, I couldn't think of it either, so it's a big accident.
Yeah.
Truly, I mean, I had a vision. My vision was I wanted every home in the world to be log. But, that's impossible. So that's a young man's dream. And as it evolved, you can't become the biggest unless you're the best.
Yeah. So
we decided we had to become the best. My brother Andre was working with me, my son Bryan Jr., after a while my grandson, the Swiss workers, Bayet and Peter, and Joel, these people, they spent 30 years of their life with Pioneer. That's a commitment. And we built the finest log homes on earth. There is no doubt in my mind that there's nobody could deliver a better product. And be honest with the customer. We could afford to be honest with the customer. We're well established. If there was a hiccup in the forests in Haida Gwaii or whatever, we had enough inventory. We could keep filling the pipeline with product.
Absorb the hiccups.
And have the product get to the customer because the contractor who does his foundation, if he's going to do the house or whatever contractor, he's got a schedule too. You have to meet his schedule or he's going to go somewhere else. The log package is going to get there and going to sit there without a roof, without anybody doing it. So there's a lot of moving parts. And these people, the team that was around me, was without a doubt the best in the world. I don't care if we were going to build computers, would have been the best in the world. I don't care. Log homes is what we wanted to do, and we nailed it.
Man.
We truly...
I'm energized. I'm fired up now. That's awesome. I love that. What a hell of a story. I mean, that's I think a really good understanding, I think, of the origins and the team that you still have now. I mean, and a testament to not only yourself, but I think everybody that's a part of that team. It's a small group of people, but because in this bio, we're talking about 120 employees, which sound like a lot, but it's really, in the grand scheme of things, a really small part of it that is kind of putting 120 people are impacting a global standard of what now a log home craftsmanship and product could end up being as a result of bringing all of these different, dynamics into one place. Williams Lake, out of all places.
Yeah, like I say, it was a big accident.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I mean, we wanted it to be the log building something, but we never knew what it would grow into. As time went on, when you get into standing on the street in Vegas, looking at how people, how these casinos promote themselves they got a pair of eyes and there's 100 casinos. How do you get them to come into your casino?
That's true.
So, anyway, and your competition won't advertise for you. As a matter of fact, they'll do the opposite. You know, they'll not say pleasant things about you. They'll unadvertise you, if that's a word. So you have to promote yourself, and you have to promote the team around you. And as far as I was concerned, I wanted everybody around me to make the best money they possibly could. We never shut down for winter. We'd work even when you'd do 2 hours work in a day because it was so cold. We'd still keep working. Never laid anybody off. We had to keep our team together.
I really wish I could remember who said this, but you might even know, but there was somebody that said, and I hope I capture this right, but when it comes to your employees, treat them and train them well enough so they can go out on their own, but treat them good enough so they never
leave. Yeah.
Do you know who said that?
I don't know offhand, but
you've heard that one before.
Of
It's
course.
bugging me now. I wish I knew who said that.
That's a fine line between getting them to a point where they could go on their own and not having them go on their own.
Training your competition.
There's a energy, psyche that you can have within a company that just everybody pulls the plow in the same direction. There's not somebody over here pulling a rope in a different direction and somebody over here.
What do they call it? Synergy.
It's a synergy. It's a synergy, all right. Yeah, I loved it, and I can't say enough about. I had the best occupation you could probably ever dream of. Like I don't know if you're allowed to mention names here, but I don't think
100%.
Bill Gates didn't have more fun than I had.
No,
every day was fun. I never had a bad day. I had days where I sweated. I had days when I drank 30 bottles of water because it was so hot and so humid in Texas or Pennsylvania or, it was too hot for a human being, just like it's too cold at 50 below for man or animal, beast. Yeah. But you know what? We went through it and we were proud of what we did. And
it was a vehicle to be able to come into contact with people that you normally wouldn't have any other way.
Yeah, I've met 2 presidents of the United States and a prime minister of Canada. How can anybody from Williams Lake ever?
Yeah.
You might meet one of them if you were lucky, if you were in the right place at the right time.
Well, we're touching on that because we can go back into like a whole barrage of other things here with Pioneer that I definitely want to get on, but I'd also want to take this opportunity to bring up something we were just talking about downstairs when it came to presidents and your involvement with heavy involvement when it came to veterans and whatnot. You've got a plaque downstairs, which I'll share in the pictures of this episode, probably at the end for anyone who's wanting to check it out. But a wall of, is it a signature from every single president?
Every president except Joe Biden.
Except for Joe Biden.
That's too new, but it's right up to Barack Obama. So.
And your involvement when it came into the veterans, you were on the board. Explain to me, what board were you on?
The Congressional Medal of Honor Museum Association in the United States.
Yeah.
So that's the top. There is no higher military honor in the United States than the Congressional Medal of Honor. I think Canada and the UK and the Commonwealth, we have the Victoria Cross.
Yep.
Which is very high.
It is.
But in the United States, of course, they don't use that.
No, of course not. We're part of the...
they broke away from that.
Commonwealth, yeah.
So anyway, I was honored to be on the board, truly honored, and met some of the most wonderful people that in extenuating circumstances proved themselves to be above and beyond.
Yeah. It's a big part of, I think, your ability to give back.
Yeah, so we did this fun thing, and it was partially because of Timber Kings, the TV show. I told the producer one day I'd like to build a log car. I don't even know if I was serious. He says, that would make a good episode. You have to build a log car. So I thought, this is good conversation. A month later, he phones me up. He says, are you working on a log car yet? I said, no, I'm trying to find a powertrain. I'm trying to find this, I'm trying to find that. I just get rid of them, because it's a lot of work to build a log car. He didn't know it, but it took me 2 years. Anyway, he kept phoning it. How's that log car coming? How's that log car coming? And of course, he's the producer, and so Gerald Overton, he's actually my grandpa-in-law. His daughter's married to my son, but he's the best mechanic I've ever met. He's totally, it doesn't matter what in mechanics, he can fix it. So I enlisted him to do some of the mechanics on the log car. Without him, the producer would still be phoning me. There'd be no log bloody car. So
he was the driver behind it?
He was the
no
brains.
pun intended.
Yeah, he was the mechanic behind it, for God's sake. So anyway, he found a frame and powertrain out of a Mazda Miata. We had to keep it small. A log is not that big. And
no, he's not.
And then we started wondering, how are we going to power this thing? Well, we had done a house more than a house, but anyway, initially just a house for people that own Buffalo Turbine in New York, out of Buffalo, New York. And he decided he would donate the engines because he's a very patriotic American. And we were going to do this whole thing was to build this car, auction it at Barrett-Jackson, and donate the proceeds to veterans. Mm. Now it's a tall order when to build the car was even a problem to start out.
Yeah.
And how do you get Craig Jackson to donate the time to auction a car when he's selling a car every 47 seconds or something and making money on both ends, on the selling and on the buying end? Anyway, we built this log car, and it kind of got into a passion, like log building. I donated my time every evening, every weekend for over a year, just to get the thing in. And Gerald did too a lot. I mean, I wasn't just alone in it, but we got the frame. He found the frame in Victoria, British Columbia. I went down and got it, brought it up, and he blasted it. And
so the frame, this is a log. What part of
the frame was out of a Mazda, and it had.
And that was sunk into the log
Well,
itself.
Eventually.
Oh, okay.
We had to take the frame, and of course, it didn't look new, so we had to sandblast it and clean all the parts and make sure the differential brakes had disc brakes all around.
Oh, yeah.
Redo all the brake, things that a car guy would do, but I'm not a car guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, Gerald took care of all that, and I found the perfect log. Actually, Peter and I found the first perfect log. And we cut the slab off where the hood was going to be on TV, and we shortened the log and did a few things. And then the TV guys, their attention span was about like a lizard. They were gone for the next year. They didn't want to see it until it was ready to go. Anyway, I worked on it in my garage, 20 below zero, didn't matter. I just worked on it, and Gerald came and worked on it when it was necessary. Anyway, we got this car, and it was beautiful. It was nature. It was renewable, a renewable car. It was electric. We made it all electric. We put batteries out of a helicopter in it. So
wow.
They had, they wouldn't spill acid, and they'd hold a charge.
So the Mazda frame, you just took the electric powertrain out of it, converted it into an electric powertrain. Yes. So just,
yeah.
Wow.
So this is all difficult. I actually had a Canadian electric
vehicle. Doesn't sound easy at all.
I had a Canadian electric vehicles out of Coombs on Vancouver Island to do the electrical, because it's very complicated. And you have to have a charger, and you have to propel this thing. It can't be a fire hazard because you're going to take it to a show, and the fire marshal inspects every vehicle. So anyway, took it down there. That's part of the 2 years, is taking it to Vancouver Island and then having to go and retrieve it and bring it back and put the finish on. So we had the car, and so the idea was, let's take this car and expose it to as much of America and Canada as we can, and it'll bring a higher price at auction. It'll become its own little brand.
Awareness. Yeah, so you're doing this. Smart man.
Well, it kind of worked because I took it as far east as Indianapolis. I never got it to New York, which I should have, but I mean, it was a lot of effort driving a pickup, pulling a car trailer with this car and taking it out for shows and getting it ready.
Well, I mean, not only that, but that's a lot of resources. That's a huge commitment financially and time. I mean,
but we donated everything.
Wow.
100%. So, you know, we took it to Barrett Jackson. We took it to Safari Club. We took it to the Sheep Foundation. We took it anywhere we could. We had Car Club in Campbell River ask us, will you bring the car? And we thought, that's a long ways. This. But we built this to expose it and get the maximum out of. We're going to do it. So we took it there, and we took it to an antique aircraft and automobile museum in Hood River, Oregon, and had it there for a weekend just to again, increase awareness and the fact that it was going to be auctioned off. Watch for this. It'll be a Barrett Jackson. We still didn't have Craig Jackson's okay to do it.
Oh, really?
It was a dream, you know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we got to Craig Jackson, and we had, you know, the Congressional Medal of Honor folks with us. We had Yellow Ribbon America, which does a lot for veterans, especially in the southwestern U.S. We had the Boot Campaign out of Texas helping us. And we took and presented it to Craig Jackson, and he said, we'll do it.
Nice.
Yeah. You know, Barrett Jackson, now that's the largest, most prestigious car auction in the world.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah. So we had the car at the show. It was the most photographed car at Barrett Jackson, and they got everything. They have Rolls Royces, they got Maseratis, they got Mustangs, they got Broncos, they got everything.
Some of the rarest cars on planet Earth go through that auction.
I got pictures of at least 10 people at one time taking a picture of the log car. At one time.
Wow.
So anyway,
That's a huge, that in itself is payoff.
Yeah, it was very emotional to me because I think we live in the best country on earth, and I think the greatest country is just south of us. The two of us together.
The best and the greatest.
I believe that.
Wow.
I don't think that we could be the greatest. You know, we have 10 times the population south of us and a military that's, you know, second to none. Anyway, but the best and the greatest, I could say we're the greatest and they're the best. But no, you can switch it around.
Yeah.
So we go to take the car over the Barrett Jackson ramp. They call it the ramp. And one of the veterans outfits in Yellow Ribbon America arranges an honor guard. So you have soldiers packing a flag in front of the car and behind the car.
Wow.
And the American soldiers, but they carried a Canadian flag also. Up on the ramp. Of course, we're with it. Wow. Craig Jackson, I think he was probably looking at the time clock, how many seconds he would have burned. Anyway, a Medal of Honor recipient, General Brady, who is the most decorated American soldier alive today, went up and spoke at the microphone.
Wow.
We had the bidding start, and I think it went at $175,000 sold. And the fellow that bought it said, I'm donating it back.
Really?
The bidding went again, $100,000. The fellow bought it, said, I'm donating it back. It never happened at Barrett Jackson, ever. The thousands of cars those guys have sold. The third time it went for whatever it was, 75. We got $350,000 US total for the car. All to donate to veterans groups. 100% to veterans groups. So Craig Jackson, I mean, by then it's 2.5 minutes. You know, he probably lost $80,000 or $90,000 himself in auction fees and that, but he was rooting.
Wow.
Everybody, unbelievable.
That is
a
very powerful story.
Yeah, we donated it all. We donated.
What was the final number?
Was
We got
$350 US. We donated 100,000 Canadian to the Royal Canadian Legion in Williams Lake, and they shared it with other branches. You know, they do a lot for veterans, and they have counseling, they have dinners, they have whatever they want to do. The Royal Canadian Legion, and the rest we donated to the Yellow Ribbon America and the Boot Foundation out of Texas. And
unreal. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, a fist pump, a handshake. I don't know what I think a lot of people right now, I'd like to, somehow through them kind of express, I think, a tremendous amount of gratitude and appreciation for what you had done there. I mean, that is a pivotal point. I'm sure that'll probably stick. I mean, obviously in your memory, but I think honestly, a lot of other people because of that probably had that spread out and rippled probably into more lives than I don't think you'll ever really be able to know or understand. I mean, that was huge, absolutely huge.
Well, I thank you for saying that. Truly, though, at no time did I have to put my life on the line.
No, but you're recognizing it. It's the same. How the value of a customer showing appreciation at the end of a build. I think what happened was that you were tipping your hat in a way that only you can, in appreciation to the veterans, with an understanding of, I think, the country and the nations, within Canada and the U.S. together, that I'm not too sure you can honestly replicate. It was a very organic, and it brought a lot of people in, and that, I think, that's we were talking about the juice and the impact, and that's where it is. Yeah,
it was one thing that I did that wasn't a publicity stunt.
Yeah.
It was for the veterans. And I honor them. They lay their life on the line, And again, I think I could never have had a Pioneer Log Homes if I lived in Russia.
No, that's
Truly.
True. That's true.
I don't care if I was born in Germany or if I was born in England. And we've taken houses to all those areas. I could never have done it. But the opportunity in North America is still here. The country is open for business. It doesn't matter about management at one point in history or not. The country is open for business. The U.S. is open for business. You can do whatever you want. You just have to apply yourself, take your feet, your arms, and your brain to work. And I know you can win.
I love that message.
Yeah.
My God, I don't even know what to say about that. I think a unique part about the house that we're in right now and what you had shown us is that you integrated, I think, that sense of patriotism and appreciation even within your own home. You've got your floor has the Canadian flag and all kinds of different, the backsplash on your stove, and I think you've integrated that value into your home in subtle ways, and then other ones where they're a little bit of a centerpiece too, in a very artistic, elegant way. It speaks volumes. One of the things that I think we can even touch on too that you have on the island is NAFTA. You have the Canadian, you have the American, and you have the Mexican flags in your countertop, representing, the three countries in trade.
Well, Kevin, if you'd have been trying to export to the U.S. in 1980, you'd have got a shock, because the only thing we had in common with the U.S. is we spoke the same language. There was no trade agreements, other than I think they had an auto pact. But I don't know how that was hammered out. But we had to pay 25% duty, or an American customer had to pay 25% duty to get a house to the United States. You could have got a house cheaper.
Right off the bat, 25%.
Yeah, you could have got less duty from Thailand, or, there was no agreements between Canada and the U.S. It was like we were still at war from 1776.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, there's two gentlemen came along, both of Irish descent. One was Ronald Reagan, and the other was Brian Mulroney.
Two gentlemen came around. Fair
the
enough.
timing was perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
The timing was
Oh,
perfect.
man.
They got together.
So should we explain the president and the prime minister?
Well, I don't know. Maybe people won't remember.
You never know. I mean, it's worth kind of to throw lobbing that out there.
Yeah. So the U.S. president was Ronald Reagan, one of my favorites, and Brian Mulroney in Canada was a conservative leader, prime minister, and they hammered out a free trade deal between Canada and the U.S. and Mexico. I mean, we are all in North America. Now, to go from 25% duty, I think it took probably 4 or 5 years to implement free trade from the time it was actually signed with President Bush, who was Reagan's vice president. He became president in 1988, I believe. So the final deal was signed, inked by George Bush Sr., number 41. And then 5 years later, I believe it was 5 years, and I might be out in my figures, my math and that, but the duty now is zero. So if
Wow, eh? Woo!
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, so they drafted this over 4 years.
well, it took that long to implement.
Implement
Yeah,
from a 25% tariff rate across the board, and in that short period of time, got it down to zero.
yeah. And in all fairness, everything is reciprocal. So they can send a Dell computer from Texas to Canada with no duty.
Yeah,
I guess
It goes two ways.
yeah,
for
it's
sure.
reciprocal. And the amount of content, you can't build everything from another country in Asia and then just send it down, get all the parts and send it down. There has to be Canadian content and U.S. content. But what a wonderful, I mean, we're talking freely here. I sat at a meeting in Texas once, and I actually hammered out a $7 million contract, which we didn't sign. We just made the contract a handshake. I didn't know who around the table was from the U.S. and who was from Canada.
Wow.
How can you tell? I mean, you got a bunch of
Yeah.
honest people.
Yeah.
They're talking. Everybody's focused on the same thing. They want the log structure. They want quality. They want delivery. They want continuity. I mean, go figure.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So just a testament of what the outcome was from NAFTA. I don't think many people understand that though.
well,
I mean, you do, but I mean, nowadays, I mean, these are something. Honestly, I mean, I am quite naive, but eager to learn. I think a lot of these nuances, but things like this. I mean, without people like yourself bringing more awareness around it, the sense of appreciation isn't there, right? And NAFTA and some of the historical points within our Canadian and American history that are even within a very short period of time, like not far from us here now, had such a huge impact on us that we're taking for granted.
yeah. Well, if you weren't around when NAFTA was put into process, then you probably wouldn't know. I know President Trump had some dealings back and forth.
He did a little bit. They redid.
He did a little bit, and it wasn't pretty. But it never is. It's politics, you know. I mean, he's out to get the best deal for his company, his country, and our side was out to get the best deal for their company, their country, and Mexico was out with the same idea. And the bartering and bantering that goes back and forth. The deal was it was always going to be a deal because the trains go across the border, the highways go across the border. We're so integrated.
Yeah.
Like everybody thinks, well, the U.S. doesn't own Canada. I'm sure Canadians own just as much of the U.S. Whether it's companies or whether it's property in Arizona or
that's true.
California or Florida or wherever. So we're two great nations that can exist together. And then our very southern neighbor, I mean, everybody has their problems, but I truly trust doing business in Mexico more than some of the eastern countries.
Yeah. Under NAFTA. I get that for sure.
Yeah. There's laws, it made it so, again, I could never have done this in Germany or Switzerland or England, because they're so established. You know, somebody controls the construction, somebody or a group or in areas, different areas in Italy. But in Canada, you could do it, and you could do it much easier once we had NAFTA. There was so many naysayers. When NAFTA come in, it's going to break the country, it's going to do this and that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it didn't.
But the political, I guess, and even the public, I guess, opinion about I guess, how that was going to look, probably, I would imagine at that time was very polarizing.
Well, it was. And, you know, we didn't have the internet. 1980, you know, it was, or 90, what was it? It was 90 when it came in, so, or 91. But you didn't have an internet. You didn't have all this free flow of information going from people. And so now, if you want to know something, you can know 3 seconds after they do a heart transplant in South Africa.
No kidding.
Just the way it made business easier. Everybody says, how do you get ahead nowadays? It's so tough. It's so bloody easy. We were doing business in Japan in the late 80s, and you couldn't have a fax machine in Williams Lake. We didn't have the technology and the phone lines in Williams Lake to have a fax machine. How do you do business in a foreign language, however many hours away, 14 hours difference from you? How do you do business?
Yeah, no
You
kidding.
do it on the internet.
Yeah, you do it now with the translation and
push of a button, it's done. You know.
You know, there's something that to touch on that though. The technology has always been designed to be able to make life easier and bring the standard of living up a notch, and that goes right across the board, especially with third world countries. I think a lot have been brought out of poverty because of the technologies and ability to be able to, you know, expand on current, you know, infrastructure and whatnot. But there's an element in there now where, you know, the smartphone with all of this information and technology at our hand, it seems like we are now more inundated and under more of, I think, a workload than ever before. I mean, I don't think I've really talked to anyone in the last, you know, 5 or so years that isn't almost at the brink of burnout when it comes to workload or scheduling. It's supposed to streamline a lot of stuff. Like what you said there, I mean, that's a tremendous advantage, but the offset of that now with email and, I mean, we keep bringing social media up and all those elements, but it puts a strain and a workload on people that you never had before.
Well, you know, so historically, I guess a robin knows when to kick its young out of the nest and make them fly.
Yeah.
How do you know how to do that with the internet or social media when we've never had any experience with it?
Yeah.
The robin had experience from its parents and the parents and the parents, but we just don't have a lot of experience. And how do you deal with this? Is it good or bad for us? I mean, the internet in 1996 was pretty easy. You had a website. That was it.
Yeah, a website, a phone line, and some screeching. A DOS system.
Yeah, or now, I mean, they have arguments about Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all that. I mean, I don't go on any of them. I'm sorry. I can't. I have, my time is too valuable. And that's what everybody has to realize. Your time is valuable. You have a finite amount of time on this earth. Whether you're the janitor at the school or whether you're a brain surgeon at the hospital, time is the only thing that you have, and it's what we all are going to run out of.
Yeah, so the value on time, whether you're a janitor, is still just as valuable to him as it is to the brain surgeon, and that's the standard.
I've always known that. I've always believed that.
You mentioned that earlier. Yeah.
So do you waste your time on TikTok or whatever? I mean, I hate to mention names, but I don't even go on it because I have productive things I can do. Yeah. I think productive as far as making some things with my hands or with my grandkids or with Jana, whatever, you know, it's just, I guess it's a mentality, and we don't know how it's going to work out because we don't have experience with it. Like I say, we didn't even have them as fax machines in Williams Lake in 1988, and now we have contact with the world in milliseconds.
Well, it's just, I think, a constant, anytime there's an unknown, element of unknown, it creates anxiety, especially because the only way to be able to deal with it is, I think, perception and you trying to figure out in the moment what is going to happen. And that's a discussion that, I've kind of touched on even with, my parents. And my dad had made a very interesting comment because we were talking about cryptocurrency and digital currency and all this other stuff. And, one of the comments he said, he's like, two points, I guess, is it felt very similar as a repeat to how people were reacting when the credit card first came in, or even the barcode. He's like, people were freaking right out when the barcode in grocery stores was coming in, and the control and a lot of stuff, and then also everything going digital when it came to credit cards and the ability for all your information to be shared. And he said it's the exact same thing, and he goes, the end result is a little bit of an unknown, but it was back then too. You just didn't have, I think, an understanding of what the future had, but the concern of what it could be turned into, I think, was what everybody was concerned about. So when he said that, I was like, wow, I guess that's a very good point to make. And as far as a lot of other things, I mean, my parents, they were part of the move in Fort St. John, and they thought nuclear warfare and Cold War was a very real threat back then. And that was a part of why they ended up going out in the middle of nowhere and becoming very self-sufficient. So this isn't this concern. A lot of, I think, things that are happening right now aren't really unique in our specific point in time. There's a little bit of a repeat in a pattern that's starting to develop here. And I'm sure you've gone through the exact same kind of, experiences and see some similar patterns yourself too.
Well, we like I said about standing in Vegas and watching the vehicles go by that are all plastered up with, come to our casino and that. You have to learn from other people. You have to learn. Nobody could learn it all themselves or invent it all themselves. And I believe the internet has been a boom to us. I believe, I just don't know how we can extrapolate it out to what it's going to do to the minds of kids now that aren't out there. Like I was trapping with my dad, my stepdad. I mean, I knew what I was doing. I knew what I had to do on the weekend. And, we ate because of it. That was part of our revenue stream. So I just don't know today if you can create revenue or you don't need revenue, or it's a different world. And that's one of the reasons that my son has a company now, because it is a different world.
Yeah.
It's advertising, everything's different. Contracts, and I didn't have contracts. I shook hands with people, but,
Yeah, that's a very strong sense of awareness. That must have been very difficult for you to be able to step back. People like Elon Musk, and I don't want to bring his name up, but we are mentioning names, and he said on numerous occasions when it came to starting a business, it was, almost like a child. I mean, there was a sense of connection there and helping, it grow and to where it is now. There's a lot of you and in it, along with other people, like you really make sure that there's a lot of acknowledgement there. But when it comes to handing the reins over now and having that sense of awareness, and then actually going through, pulling back, allowing, your son to take over, and now, like the kid moving out, it's a good thing to do, but it's not always the easiest. What was that like? Like, where was that moment where you had to say, okay, bite your tongue and step back just a little bit?
Well, he's been involved in the company for a number of years, and the most important thing to me was take care of the people that I had, Pioneer staff. Take care of, like we touched on it earlier with Samson Jack, and I don't know if what I should call them, but Indigenous people. 50% of our workforce is Indigenous because, as a rule, they like to work outside. They like the outdoors. They can work with their hands. They're mechanically inclined, and what we do is mechanical. It's physics. So I just wanted to keep all those people, and handing over the reins was probably not that difficult as long as the team could stay together.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, I can look from the outside and I can go to work every day I want, if I want. And I do. Whatever they need done, I do. I love the company. I love the people. I love the business. I love the clients. I mean, it's all been a dream.
When you're going back now into, I guess, when Pioneer Log Homes was on TV, with Timber Kings, did that add to the process of where now there was a bit of a sense of awareness, and then that process, especially after the show had come to an end, where that transitional period came into where you backed away? Was that, like, what kind of impact did the show have, and a little bit more specifically about your ability to be able to now step away behind the scenes a little bit and let it kind of take on its own set, direction?
Yeah. So to go to the show, I got very sick in 2010. So I had to step back a bit at that time. And my son and my brother were running the place. It went on as if I had never left. But so I thought, how can I be productive? I can't work. I'm like an invalid. I thought to myself, every time, we'd been on TV a few times, we'd been on Amazing Log Homes. It was produced and directed by HGTV US. And there was, I think, 6 log homes in North America. 3 of them were ours. Well, every time that show aired in the States, and they don't just air something once and put it on a shelf, it goes from network to network.
Oh, really?
And time frame to time frame. I mean, Timber Kings is still on history right now.
It is, yes. Yeah.
So, but they did the same, and every time it would go on, we'd notice the phones got busy.
Oh.
So I thought, well, I was an invalid. I had a place in California. I had an office in California. I thought, well, I'm pretty close to the source here. I'm going to find myself a producer and get him to produce a show about log homes. So I did. And there was a producer, he was actually in Canada doing a show on wood carving at the time. So I went and introduced myself, and he was from LA or from Beverly Hills or somewhere down there. And I had a place about 2 hours north, so I just kept phoning him. At first, I don't think he knew a log house from a brick house. He's a producer. I mean, They're in a different world. So anyway, finally he came up to my place in California, and we had a working ranch, and we were doing, gathering of the cattle and branding and, separating the cattle and stuff. And he stayed at the house overnight, and he liked the house, and he said, okay, I'll come up and I'll do a sizzle.
A sizzle?
Sizzle is like a 6 or 7 minute what the show should be like.
Oh, kind of like a trailer?
Promotion. It's a promotion. And then you try and sell it to the networks. So I said, okay, man, we're on. We're in. So anyway, he came up and we did this sizzle, and I involved all the guys so that they would know, how their personalities were and how talented they were. They're the most talented log builders in the world, so why shouldn't they be, why should a guy that shoots alligators get more airtime than the most talented log builders in the world?
Yeah.
Anyway, he came up and he did a sizzle, and he actually did a very good job of it, for not knowing anything about building and that. Of course, he knew film, so he took it and he started shopping it. And I guess you shop it to, Discovery, History, and all these networks and that. And somebody at HGTV Canada said, we kind of like that. So possibly you should do so I can't remember what the sequence was, but maybe we had to do a 20-minute show then and take it to them. And
like a pilot almost?
Yeah, and then do a cost estimate, because, of course, cost is number one. Everything else comes somewhere after cost with them, or with a lot of businesses. It does not just them. Anyway, we did and took it, and they said they could probably, produce 6 or 8 episodes, whatever it was. Well, I think we ended up doing 12 that year. And It was their number one show. HGTV Canada's number one show.
Wow.
Never had such a hit. People were waiting for it. And they,
that's awesome.
They have ways of, They have ways like this Nielsen rating, so they can see how many people watch the show. They can see how many people are surfing and stop at the show.
Oh,
they can see how many people during a commercial surf to something else and come back. They have all these stats, It's all about money.
Analytics.
Yeah, and so anyway, they signed on for a year or two, and of course, we didn't know it, but they were going to shop it to the world. They shop it at some film festival to European TV networks, like German and Scottish and Danish and Russian and all over the world. In the end, it went to, I believe, 150 countries.
Oh, really?
I flew through Seoul, Korea once, and I was standing in Seoul, Korea. I don't recognize anybody, and people are coming up asking for my autograph.
Wow.
In Seoul, Korea. I was on my way back from a job in Russia. I thought, wow, now we've connected the dots.
Yeah.
This is it. We did it. So I had the best crew in the world, bar none, the best of any business. I had the best crew in the world. We'd taken houses to over 20 countries. We'd met presidents, met prime ministers, had a TV show.
Yeah.
It's probably time to retire when you're ahead and before your son is 70.
Yeah. So writing on the wall.
Yeah, it is, Your balance goes, you get 65 years old and you're walking 20 feet in the air and you're balanced, your equilibrium starts, your reaction time starts, there's logs coming in. And I still love putting up houses, and I do, whenever I'm asked, I go and put up houses. But, there comes a time when you have to step back.
There's one lesson that I learned when I was growing up. We touched on our earlier conversation on some of the dynamics that changed when you're a worker and the knowledge and experience, and then that transition when you get into management, right? And one of the biggest things that I learned, I guess, at an earlier stage in management is that when things are going really good, you don't realize sometimes just by you coming out just to be there for two minutes, your presence now within their workspace changes everything. And sometimes what you're seeing is the result of you just being now in a certain place and picking up on inconsistencies or things that you're not happy with, or just because of a result of you being there that weren't even there before you even showed up. So knowing when to pull away and let people do their job, but then also there is a time and a need for when you need to step in. But that understanding and how to navigate between those, that's a little bit of a unique, I think, awareness that real leaders start to really get a sixth sense about. But with you obviously being one of those people where you realize that you need to pull back and let it you've got the best builders in the world, and the company got to where it was, and that probably was a very unique understanding on your end to be able to say, pull back, even though, again, it went against the grain.
Yeah, against the grain. Management comes from the top, but the workforce comes from everybody else. So I truly didn't care if I was on a job and we tried to run the cleanest jobs in the world. You can go anywhere and see garbage laying everywhere and 2x4s and cutoffs and pieces and sawdust, but truly we wanted to run, and I wanted our clients to see that we were professional enough to run clean jobs. So I didn't want swearing on the job because we have more than a 4-word vocabulary.
Yeah.
A lot of construction sites, they have 4 or 3-word vocabulary.
Yeah.
So, and I wanted a clean work site. So I didn't care if I was sweeping the floor. I didn't care. And they'd say, hey, boss, hand me a pounder, hand me some screws or whatever. Yeah. If I wasn't up there, I'd yell at them, can I get this, can I get that? And I'd be polite about it. I didn't say, hey, you lowlife, send this up. No, it was always equals. We were always equals. Didn't matter. And I truly didn't care if I was sweeping the floor or putting up a log, as long as I was on the job with my guys.
Wow.
That was the most important thing.
What about now the incorporation of the family tree with the root system? Very, very popular and a unique feature that I don't know is in other areas of log building. But let me tell you, it is it's a piece of art that is very hard to be able to match, never mind beat. Where did that come from? Like, where did the idea come from? How the hell do you even do that?
So it was a challenge. We built for some Mormon folks in Arizona, and it was a big house. It was over 20,000 square feet. This is back in the 90s.
20,000 square feet.
Yeah, and they wanted a place they could take pictures for the next 200 years of graduations, weddings, different ceremonies, important times in their lives that would carry on. And these people, like I drew the house. So I used to draw a lot of the houses because the fellow that I told you about in California that was the architect from Vietnam, he was a full-blooded Salinas Indian, but he came up and taught me how to print properly so the building inspectors liked the plans, and he loved log homes. So anyway, I drew the home for them. That was actually one of the last homes I ever drew, but anyway, it was in the 90s, and they wanted this family tree. So I told my brother Andre they want a family tree. So he went to some loggers in Bella Coola. They actually it had come down on a slide, and here comes this. It was the most beautiful family tree we've ever had, and it was the first one. So my son built the house. He was, I think, 26 years old when he built the house. It was 20,000 square feet. Now, I can tell you, I wouldn't have done it when I was 26 years old, but he'd had a lot of experience by then. If he wanted to see me when he was a kid, he had to come to the job. He wasn't going to talk to me at home. I was busy drawing plans at night and filing saws, and he had to see me at work. So anyway, he had a lot of experience by then. So he built this 20,000 square feet, and he did the work now to put a tree with roots, and there was beams intersecting into it. There was roof load on it. I mean, it was it was a bear. But you know what? We put that house together, 20,000 square feet. I think it took 5 days. It was completely up. The house, the family tree was in there. When it got there, when the family tree came on a truck pretty well by itself, because it probably weighed 30,000 pounds or so, and it's quite long, and the root ball, the family actually got up on it and got a picture of themselves.
Oh, wow.
They were, like I said, they were Mormon folks.
I bet you that picture's a family heirloom now.
It is. And they've had, he's a senator in Arizona.
Oh, really?
Now, yeah. So I stay in touch with him whenever I'm down there. I get a hold of him and that, which isn't that often, but it's often enough. And talk about the good old days and what we did.
So I guess for those who might not know what the family tree is, can you describe what it like? What are the features of a family tree that has to be just the root ball, or like what goes into that?
Well, so Mother Nature creates this beautiful art. Cedar, because cedar doesn't have a taproot, that's a root that goes straight down, like a Douglas fir has a taproot. Everything on a cedar is above the ground, or on the top of the ground.
Yeah.
So if it's 150 feet tall in a 100-mile-an-hour wind, you can imagine the leverage that's
on those roots.
On the roots, on the bottom of the tree, the base of the tree. So cedar spreads out, and it has what we call root flutes and bark seams, and that makes the trunk very, very interesting. Probably more interesting than almost any tree on earth.
Just interesting in the wood grain, or what
character of the wood.
Oh, okay.
How the shape of the tree as it goes from a vertical cylinder into this flat root system. So quite often we're dictated by how much you can haul on the highway, on how wide the root, because the root system probably goes out 80 feet in every direction
Wow.
on a big tree. So my brother Andre was working with a logger in Bella Coola, and they found this beautiful tree come off a slide and was just floating, bobbing around in the ocean. It was probably a hazard to shipping traffic, you know. But anyway, they put an excavator on a barge and went out and loaded it on the barge and brought it to our site in Nympho Lake. Bryan was running the site at Nympho then. And Bryan fit it all into this beautiful structure. It's still, so we built that in, I think, 1998. This is 2023 when we're doing this. It's still in our brochure today.
Oh, really?
25 years later.
The first one.
The first.
Wow.
The first family tree.
Wow. And so, okay, when you say a slide, what is that? What do you mean a slide?
But when you get out to the coast, it's all rock. It's hard rock, granite, and different types of rock, and very steep. So in the winter, they might get 3 feet of snow, and it's very wet snow. Like, you can't shovel it. And then here comes a rainstorm.
Oh.
And you get, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 inches of rain. All that pressure is pushing down the hill. Well, you have big slides everywhere as you're driving a boat through the channels in Bella Coola and all the way up to Rupert and probably all the way to Anchorage. I've never taken a boat all the way, but where the vegetation just lets go. It can't hold on to the rock, the slippery rock underneath it any longer,
and all that earth and everything
Ends up
just
in the
all in
ocean.
one time because it's probably got a rock base and there's
Oh, it's-
nothing to hold it in place anymore once the ground's saturated and the root system just kind of lets go.
yeah. So where it starts is probably somewhere towards the bottom, but when the bottom lets loose, then the above it lets loose.
Oh,
and
yeah.
above. I don't think it's pressure from the top. I think it's the bottom that but
Erosion.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it ends up so.
And so this family tree is, well, not one particular, but any family tree is a cedar root system that flares out, and you're able to clean it up so that it's just a certain size as far as a footprint in diameter, and then it goes up to the trunk or the main part to a certain height.
Do whatever
Like
you
whatever
get what
height
you get. You know, if you have a tree that's 4 foot at the butt, you're probably going to have a 3 foot top at 30 feet.
Wow.
So then you work with that to
Yeah.
build it as a structure within the home, you know.
Man, is that ever cool? What is it like to be able to clean that up? Like peeling the bark off of something like that
It's
must.
the worst job in the world because the tree sat in the dirt and rocks and wobbled back and forth in the wind for so long, and there's sand and elements ingrained in the wood, and you're trying to peel it. And every time you hit one of those
you're
pieces,
nicking
you nick your chisel, and it's back to the grinder. And that it's.
Labor intensive.
I think that first tree, and I may be wrong, but I don't think the first tree. It took over 1,000 hours to clean.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
1,000 man hours.
1,000 man hours. It had burrows on it. It was truly. I mean, I'll give you a picture of the tree, and you can put it on this.
Yeah, that would be actually. You have a picture of it.
Yeah.
Of course, it's in your brochure, but do you have pictures of like cleaning it and whatnot, like the man hours?
I'd have to go back and try and find pictures of cleaning it because the construction process really is it's a labor of love. If you see somebody peeling a log, in about 2 minutes you're ready to go watch something else. Because first of all, you don't want to do it. But there is truly it in itself, peeling is very intricate and it takes a very
There's a
dedicated
skill.
individual. And it's a skill, yeah. So watch which way the grain goes, and you get close to a knot, and the grain starts to change direction and take to so it supported the branches. And you know, you can do it. Anybody can do a shitty job.
Yeah, true enough.
It's true, but to do a good job, that takes a better man.
Well, like
Or
I
girl.
said, when I was doing some of the peeling, the guy who's showing me, how to do it proper. Well, we didn't have a lot of the safety gear we have now, or leather chops and stuff. But to try and hit home, I think what he was trying to explain was the scar that he had just above his knee, right in the meat of his, like where his leg was, and it was ugly. Big old scar, and it's just from straddling the log, and he came back, and he obviously I don't know how it happened, slipped or whatever, came back too hard, and it cut fairly deep. And so he was showing me some technique, and there's definitely, you got to pay attention. Those are very sharp pieces of well, it's not equipment but tools.
Yeah, if your tools aren't sharp, you're going to work too hard.
Yeah.
So you have to respect your tools. You have to keep them sharp and respect them. And if they're made to eat wood, which they are, they'll eat meat like nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Meat is not no resistance whatsoever to a sharp tool. So.
Well, what has happened in, I guess, the approach between how you built log homes then to now? Do you have automatic, like, machines that have replaced the manual end of it, or have you kept fairly, consistent in that approach?
No, I'd say absolutely not. But our clients want to see the hand peeled marks.
Wow.
They don't want to see where a grinder ground something in 2 minutes, where if you slick the corner, maybe it took 20 minutes. 2 minutes to 20 minutes. Took 10 times as long. But you know what? It's there forever.
Yeah.
Hundreds of years, people are going to say, look at those marks in the corner, how they peeled it. They didn't just take a sanding belt or a grinder and grind that. That's the beauty of what we do. People appreciate the handcrafted care and dedication and passion that went into the house.
Yeah. The accuracy, where it comes at the skill. I mean, we're talking handcrafting in a way where the foundation and the notching and the way everything gets all fit together has to allow for proper, true alignment when you get to the very top of the peak of the roof. And that's handcrafted still, like with all. Yeah. I mean, my goodness, How long does it take someone to be able to even develop a skill like that? Like, this is a lifetime of.
It is. It's a lifetime. And like any trade, so a log builder should be 4 years of carpentry, because you have to know how to build stairs. You have to know how to do windows. It's all part. But after 4 years of carpentry, we expect another 2 years of log building to be able to say you're a log builder. But then, how do you get the experience? The next 10 or 15 years teaches you how you actually lift 60,000 pound log.
All the different lifting techniques.
Yeah.
And
that's a whole industry in itself.
Oh, it is, yeah. Choke points and rigging and like everything that goes in.
Yeah.
Wow. One other aspect that is huge when it comes to log homes is the carvings and the personalizations with it. So we're not talking about just any kind of carving that you can make as far as like a seat, but these are carvings that are actually integrated into the structure of the house. How do you integrate that? And what's that artistic approach? Do you try and take the customers' ideas, or do you kind of see things that pop out as you're building it, or is it part of the design, or what goes into it all? All of the above?
Well, all of the above, but you have to remember the customer lives in the house. So no matter what you see, if you see an elephant and they don't like elephants, there's no elephant going in the house. Yeah. So if the builder, and we always try and have the builder deal direct with the customer. After the customer has made his contact and Roy and Doug and them have done the plans, our design department, if the builder sees something in a log or thinks it would make a better house, he can phone the client direct. He doesn't have to. I often use the example, the customer phones the salesman and says, I want a wolf on my ridgepole. And then the salesman a couple days later goes to the builder, maybe Joel, and says, Joel, I think he wanted a bear on his ridgepole. So much can get lost in translation, even English to English.
Yes.
Not just other language. So why not have the client deal direct with the builder?
Wow.
And that has taken half the grief out of building, when everything is understood completely and accurately.
That's very unique.
Yeah.
Customer, builder.
Yeah, it's a lot different than most builders. It's always deal with the
Well,
salesman.
you're building, I think, a relationship that is very unique,
Yeah.
isn't it? I mean, that's not something that's not typical business.
Oh no, no.
I can tell you, there's multi layers there in typical business. That's a very unique, interesting approach.
Yeah,
right?
so during some of the home shows that we had done, a log home show, you get to listen to the guy next to you and the guy next to you on the other side. You know, we've done shows in Denver and say Redding, California, and maybe Salt Lake City. You get to listen to what they have to say, and you get to listen to their builders. You know,
Yeah.
they bring builders with them. I don't know if some of them maybe were having a race on who could build the worst house. I'm not sure. Or who could lie the most to the customer, you know?
Yeah,
It's
ooh,
always
it's,
buyer beware,
yeah,
you know, whether you
absolutely.
buy a car or freezer or a couch or whatever. But truly, I mean, it is buyer beware. And I know that if you ask Pioneer something and they tell you something, that's the way it'll be.
Yep, that's awesome.
And that's what more can you ask?
Well, it's it's allowed you to build and experience a lot of what you have. And we were talking earlier too, Pioneer Log Home was a vehicle for you to be able to experience and meet people that otherwise would have never been, you know, possible. And I can't even imagine that being part of the journey, and probably enriching, I think, the experience even with your team too, that direct contact with different customers. They're experiencing exactly what you are now too, right? And enriching their whole experience and love for what they're doing. I mean, that's very difficult to do and accomplish.
You can't buy it.
No, you can't. No.
You have to earn it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One other question. I know we're wrapping. I mean, first here, like, we're talking about preparing, and I've got all this stuff and I haven't even really touched it. But that's because this has been an absolute amazing experience, even for myself, to meet you and be able to talk to you about you know, everything that Pioneer represents and who you are. But before I wrap things up here, there's a feature that is very unique that is in this house, which I'll take a picture of, where it's that floating, what do you call that there? The floating
Hammer,
bridge?
it's a truss.
Truss?
Yeah. So all we're doing is taking the load to the walls. Now, most trusses that you see, like on a framed house and that, they all have a king post in the middle that comes and touches the bottom cord. They need it for strength. What a lot of folks like in a log home, and I won't say everybody, but most folks like, is a great room. They don't want a post coming down there and a post over there and a post over there. They want this clear span, and we've clear spanned, you know, like 45, 50 feet.
Wow.
By putting a truss with very substantial members, but the
Load bearing
top cords actually take the load to the wall. They don't put it on the log. The log that goes across from side to side is only to hold tension for horizontal.
Huh.
The vertical is going down on the walls. So
Wow.
actually, and I must say that's thanks to Hans-Uli Herger, who was the first Swiss fellow that came over here to show us the design like that.
Really? That's what he had brought over?
Yeah, that's one of the things he brought over. It's
Wow.
Hans-Uli Herger he was a strong, he's left us now. He
What I'm going to do,
passed away.
because I don't have the ability to have a cameraman do anything in this recording, I'm going to take a picture of where I'm sitting right now. Click, there's that picture. And I'm going to take this picture and overlap it so people can look at what we're dealing with right now. So this is my remote. This is my camera action. I'll take another picture.
So this one Hans-Uli Herger built, and it was the first one that we ever did.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had to have it engineered. You know, it's all.
So is this something that is a very common feature now in a lot of your homes?
I would say that a high percentage of our homes have hammer trusses in them.
Well, it's a
love
pretty
them.
cool feature. I like it. I mean, it really gives the open space accent that is, it's not obstructive. Like, it doesn't actually, it adds to the view and the elegancy of the wood structure.
It adds character to the house.
It does.
doesn't it?
Absolutely, it
And
does.
People ask questions. How come that doesn't come down to the bottom?
Yeah. Well, why don't we wrap things up? Anything you would want to mention, Noel? I mean, any shout outs or anything to anybody?
I appreciate you taking the time to learn about the journey, the log building journey, about my family, about our crew, the most wonderful people in the world, our clients that picked us. And without them, there wouldn't be a Pioneer. Every one of them, whether it's Jim Redekop or Bruce Wilson or, Bill Braymeyer, it doesn't matter. Every one of them that picked us to build their home took us another step into the future at the time. And I just can't thank everybody enough. I just cannot.
Well, that's I think really good to leave on. I couldn't have said it better. That's for sure. And I appreciate the recognition in advance and your time too. I think a lot of people don't really fully realize the behind the scenes that go into a lot of this stuff. And you offered a place to stay right across the highway with our trailer. And then this morning I had my wife and my grandson along with your wife here, and we're all kind of sharing and looking at all the different things here, and it's taken up a huge part of the day. That is a big deal, and I do honestly really appreciate it. And I think a lot of the people that are going to be watching this are going to get a tremendous amount of value out of it also. So likewise, thank you.
Yeah, thanks both ways.
All right. Well, guys, take care.
Adios. This is George Bush, number 41, George Bush Sr. General Norman Schwarzkopf. He was the general in the first Gulf War. It took him 6 or 7 days to put Iraq down and liberate Kuwait.
Oh, wow.
This is a general, a two-star general that we built a log home for in Idaho.
I never grew up with that.
And over here is
Like, I wasn't that thing for us. No, okay, I've had some dark ones.
Chuck Yeager. He's the first man to exceed the sound, or break the sound barrier in a jet in the California desert, Mojave Desert.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Chief Mike Scagnelli of the NYPD on September 11th. And Doug Peterson was the commanding general at the Air Force, largest Air Force base in the United States.
Unreal.
How about those people?
And this is every signature.
Yeah, it starts in the middle. There's a letter there from, so there's a letter from Thomas Jefferson. The United States was a new country. It had broke away from the UK, from England. And these are letters, a letter in 4 different languages, asking for permission to be able to sail through Portuguese waters, Spanish waters, French waters, and it's signed by Thomas Jefferson, who is, I believe, the 4th president, or the 3rd president of the United States. But at the time, he wrote the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson The president wrote this, and he wrote the Constitution.
Wow. That is an amazing part of history right here. Unreal.
This is the book. There's about 3,000 U.S. military over the years that have got this medal. It's the highest honor of anything they can do for anybody that's in any branch of the American military. So that's Air Force, because they have a separate Air Force, Marines, Army, Navy. So I was on the board of directors for the Medal of Honor, U.S. Medal of Honor Museum. So they flew this flag over, and there's a description on it, over Kabul, Afghanistan. And then that's the
In your
flag.
honor.
Yeah, the flag is in there, folded up. That's the way,
Yeah.
proper way to fold a flag, and a plaque. And then this came from, in the show American Sniper, the fellow that got shot in the face. His name was Ryan Job. They called him Giggles. So this is an award from
Jules.
donations that we made towards veterans.
Okay.
Oh, the equator. So there's none in Africa, none in South America. They're all in the northern hemisphere.
MCT oil.
How do we turn that there?
I don't know if it turns probably some of those pins.
Yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
The,
been moved.
Great, now we're gonna go over there and see what
This
gets
guy.
sprinkled too.
so these are all the places that you're.
Up until, well,
Homes are-
it's a number, we've probably done 60 homes in Alaska. Well,
Big Black was
there wasn't
easy to get
enough
off at
place for
school.
60
It's
pins.
Some stuff is.
And then Arizona, I had an office in Arizona and California. So
Check all of you.
there's a lot of pins in the states that touch Arizona and California.
You know what I know?
And nothing below the equator.
Nothing below the equator. It probably has to do with the affluence.
Yeah.
Gotta do that when we get back.
All over the world, pretty much above the equator.
Yeah, Kazakhstan, Moscow.